Hi, my dear Astro family. Here is your weekly forecast starting on the 16th of March until the 23rd of March. So we are looking at just slightly bit longer than a week. And we do that because Mercury is basically going to be making two passes on the nodes. One is going to be at the beginning of the week, and the other one is going to be at the end of the week. So basically, the very first aspect is going to be taking place on the 17th of March. And Mercury retrograde is conjuncting the North Node. And then on the 23rd of March, we're going to have the third conjunction happening between Mercury and the North Node, but Mercury is going to be direct. This is actually quite rare, and I would say quite significant as well. Because one pass is a conjunction while the other one is one is in a retrograde motion while the other one is in a direct motion. And Mercury has hit already the North Node once. So the beginning of the week is the second and the end of the week is the third pass. So imagine this as a cosmic bridge between your past and your future. Why? Because Mercury is retrograde right now. And North Node is the point of future. So Mercury, of course, is in the sign of Pisces, and while the North Node represents our collective and personal destiny, it's a growth point. Somehow in the sign of Pisces, it suggests that the information you are receiving now, it's not necessarily a kind of like a typical retrograde glitch. It's more of a fated redirection of your life. It shows that we're going to have to think through how we are going to be changing our future. Now, Mercury is currently backtracking through Pisces, a sign that favors intuition over logic. So, on one hand, Mercury is going to be actually stationing direct on 20th of March. A stationing direct means that it stops moving backwards. It's just going to be sitting on that point for a little while, just a day or two, and then it's going to start moving forward. And that's why we have got the March 23rd, another conjunction happening between them two, the final time. So it really feels like this is about course correction. This is a rare opportunity actually to fix kind of like the missed turn that we might have taken, for example, in mid-February when we had the very first conjunction happening between them two. So think of it as a GPS that keeps recalculating until you finally take the right exit. Now that's exactly what that Mercury and Northwood conjunction represents. So we had the very first pass on February 12th. We might have had an initial idea there, or maybe we got a piece of news. Maybe it was a bit like a nudge towards going, like toward a new direction, but maybe you didn't have all the data, all the facts that you needed. Now we've got the second pass happening, March 17th. The second path is always about review. So it brings that Mercury retrograde brings you back to that same topic you somewhat initiated back in around February 12th. And you might realize you misunderstood something or someone, or the previous plan needs to be kind of scrapped just to make room for something better. And then we're going to have the third pass, which is happening on the 23rd of March, and that's the commitment there. Now, Mercury moves forward, Mercury crosses the node again for the last time. So, this potentially is the time when the fog clears. And let's say you are finally ready to sign on the dotted line in a contract, or you're ready to make the decision about your final decision about what way you want to go towards. So imagine that, I don't know, February, for example, you received an opportunity for a promotion or you started a new project, but the details were fuzzy, and then we are reviewing the contract on March 17th, and then maybe we find the error, and then we realize that that role doesn't actually align with your long-term plans. So maybe on March 23rd, you're going to start negotiating the terms, or you choose a different path, something that feels more like it's meant to be. Okay? Or relationship wise, imagine that an old partner or an old friend reached out to you in February and maybe you weren't sure how to feel about that. And then on that March 17th, we have got this emotional conversation. That's very typical for Pisces anyway. And then they reveal the truth to you, something that you haven't seen before. And March 23rd, maybe we decide to let them back into our life, or we close the door for good. And then you are moving towards your own future. So this is how you're gonna have to think about this Mercury retrograde crossing the North Node 3 times. So therefore, this is a bit of a deja vu type of topic. Because the topic comes back from you for you from mid-February. Somehow it resurfaces. So you're gonna have to pay a close attention because it is back for a reason. But you might want to be waiting until the 23rd, just to, because the 17th is a little bit more like a, realization. The 23rd is a lot better for final actions because let the direct motion of Mercury, provide the clarity that you need. And because Pisces is highly intuitive, it also asks you to listen to your guts. Don't just focus on the facts because the facts might be blurry, but your feelings potentially might be a lot clearer right now. So then we've got next day, 18th of March, when the sun is making a sextile to Uranus. So sun is in Pisces and Uranus is still in the sign of Taurus. Why we talked about that Mercury North Node, which is a fated message type of scenario. It feels like with the Sun and Uranus, it's like a bit of a divine spark. It's about having certain type of insights that you might be turning into certain type of actions. The sun is in a very dreamy sign though. But that helpful sextile link to Uranus, which is the planet of revolution and sudden breakthroughs, it's in a very grounded sign as well, Taurus. So it really feels like that instead of getting stuck and being in our head, which Mercury might have got a tendency to do, or being going down on a nostalgic road, I think the Sun Uranus sextile can actually give you the clarity you need. It's like a flash of lightning in a fog. Imagine it that way. So it allows you to take a spiritual or intuitive idea and find a way to make it work in the real world. We have got a very heavy Pisces cusp of our in our charts. So of course that Uranus has got a tremendous amount of work to do to kind of try to grab us out, but this sextile can allow us to do that. I mean, you might have been worried, for example, about finances or budgeting, or maybe you have got some investments and then it's stalled a little bit. All those are Taurus type of energy. But there is a potential here to see a non-traditional way to solve this problem, for example. Maybe, you discover a new digital tool, or maybe you are ready to monetize a hobby of yours. The danger with a lot of Piscean energy that we are dreaming about being stable. But Uranus is asking you to take the genius step toward it. Maybe you have been feeling stuck in a rut. For example, when it comes to your health or even certain type of routines. So this might be asking you that instead of like grueling new gym plan, why am I not finding an unusual solution? Maybe an app that, somehow it makes it fun to do the habits or a very unique wellness practice, for example, that might fit your schedule better. This is not about big changes. This is just small changes that we are going to make, but yields a massive feeling of freedom. I can also imagine that maybe a friend of yours is gonna give you like a suggestion, and that suggestion might be something that feels super radical right now. Why? Because, of course, we're not just talking about the Sun and Uranus sextile, but I'm still considering the fact that Mercury and Mars and Pallas Athene are in the sign of Pisces as well. If you have got some unconventional idea popping up in your head today, I think you shouldn't be dismissing it with Sun and Uranus sextile because that might be the Uranian spark you need to get you move forward. Yeah, this might be a day when you want to be setting up a new system, you want to be implementing a new software, something that might be making your habits or life a lot easier as well. Or if you want to be breaking some of your bad habits and routines, the Sun and Uranus sextile can help you in that too. Let's say you want to have a new way to work or something, new to eat, a new eating habit. Because what Uranus does, it disrupts. So it disrupts certain type of bad habits, which often is a Pisces terrain anyway. And then you can experience certain type of breakthroughs. So with Mercury and the nodes, you have to realize that there is a need here to make a change in your past habits. And then the Sun Uranus is finding that genius way to actually do that. And then the third pass between Mercury and the Sun is all about locking it in and then moving forward. Now, on the very same day, though, we've got another aspect happening. And that's also a very important one because Venus and Jupiter are in square. And the reason why it's important because all that Piscean energy is ruled by Jupiter. And now Venus is actually in square to it, and Venus rules Uranus. So imagine this as, I mean, it's a square. So that creates a tension. While that Sun and Uranus are giving you these opportunities for a breakthrough, Venus in Aries squaring Jupiter in Cancer is pushing us towards too much of a good thing. Venus is in an impulsive sign, right? It wants it right now. And Jupiter is in a protective sign. It wants to nurture, it wants to provide. So that's the tug of war here. Venus, which is the planet of desire, spending, social harmony, squaring the planet of growth, access, and abundance in a very sensitive sign as well. So I think this energy gives a lot of enthusiasm here, just it lacks the stop button. It's really about going big or going home type of transit. We can feel super confident. We can have the desire to treat ourselves. There is a huge risk of overpromising, overspending, overreacting emotionally as well. It's kind of like drinking a glass of champagne and then, but on a beer budget. Oh yeah, I'm gonna afford, drinking champagne today. So it might be that you see a, luxury kitchen appliance, for example, that's very Cancerian. And then you have got a burning need, Venus in Aries, to own it. It's about investing into your own happiness as well, and then the bill arrives, and then all of a sudden that excitement fades away. So you might want to wait 48 hours or so, until the square passes, then consider whether I need that. Or I can imagine a family member who asks for a favor or invites you to an event. And, Aries is quite a generous sign. So you will say, yes, sure, I'm going to handle it. I'm going to sort it out. But then Jupiter in Cancer starts making that emotional weight of that promise, and then it feels a lot heavier later. So we can end up feeling drained because we overextended, especially our emotional boundaries. So you have to be checking your calendar. You have to be considering your energy level before you commit to something. Okay, or imagine, I mean, on one hand, this is an invitation to watch your wallet because impulse buys are kind of at all-time high with this. I think it can bring a lot of mood swings as well. At one moment, we are super happy, and the next moment, we are emotionally overwhelmed. So we're going to have to, ground ourselves, which is not necessarily easy because Venus disposes Uranus. And Uranus is making that sextile to the sun. So that's often about excitement. So let's summarize a little bit. The sun Uranus gives you the genius idea. That's a brainy aspect. And Venus and Jupiter gives you the big desires. So genius aspect, big desire, huge wallet. So this could really be about where the brain is trying to vet the heart, basically. Now, on the same day, we are still on the 18th, we have got an asteroid called Isis entering the sign of Cancer also. So let me just go on pages so I can show you that. So let's just look for Isis. The astrological number is 42, as you can see, if you would like to look it up where it is in your chart. So, like the sun is doing this breakthrough and then Venus is pushing for access now. Well, Isis in the sign of Cancer, this is a bit of a reassembly of things that have been broken or scattered, really. Because it enters a sign of Cancer, that's about home and heritage and emotional foundation. So it really feels like we are trying to restore something in our family. Isis is an archetype of a healer. It's the reconstructor, basically. So we are trying to somehow rearrange the home here. Somehow we are trying to reconnect with our emotional roots. Somehow we are trying to fix something up within our family. So, I mean, Mercury is super busy now with these fated messages. Isis is beginning a journey of repairing something that was already lost. So this is not about fixing a car. This is more about healing an entire lineage line there. This is about finding that missing pieces of your personal history or your domestic life to make the home whole again, repairing connections with others. Maybe you go and then start looking at some old family photos or, documents that have been sitting, I don't know, in the basement for years. And then maybe you feel that urge to kind of like organize them. And then you start kind of like looking at the timelines of those photos, and then you find that missing link in your family story. And maybe that's something that explains, let's say, an emotional pattern in your life. Yeah, maybe this is about home renovation, Maybe a part of your home is a little bit neglected. Maybe you had a bit of a leak. Maybe you want to find the right contractor, to finally fix something in the home. This is again a repair that makes that house feel like a home again. And I think the biggest one is the emotional reconnection element here. Especially potentially with a mother figure in your life, especially if it has been fractured. Then Isis says we're gonna have to reconnect. It's about reconciliation, basically. It's about having also the courage, because it's a cardinal sign, to actually reach out to that person and reassemble the bond. So I think, we shouldn't be letting Venus Jupiter hype, you know, lead you to overspend on this ISIS restoration, though. I think that might be a bit of a warning here. However, we can definitely use the Sun Uranus sextile, that breakthrough, to find a very clever, potentially modern way to fix that old emotional family problem or that home. However, Isis in Cancer is about focusing on the wholeness. It's about you having to look at your foundation and then seeing what's missing in that foundation. It is about honoring the past as well. So maybe it's going back to a tradition that you used to do, but you haven't done that for a while. And also, the other warning sign here is that Venus in Aries is very impatient because it's squaring Jupiter. And Jupiter is now disposing, or one of the rulers of that Isis too. So remember that restoration takes time. Isis didn't find all the pieces in a day. Therefore, neither will you. If you don't know the story about Isis, basically, she was trying to reassemble her husband who got killed. And then she found all the body parts, and then she put him back together, and then they lived again happily ever after. That's the very story there. And then if it would, okay, so before we move on, so Isis, as you can see, its astrological number is 42, and Isis moves pretty slowly. So she moves approximately about 2 degrees each week. Okay, so she's going to enter the sign of Leo somewhere around June 27th. So you might want to put that down in your calendar. Now, the next stop that we should talk about is Apollo. Now, Apollo is moving back into the sign of Cancer. I made a separate video about Apollo, by the way, because Apollo spends approximately about 9 or 10 months now in the sign of Leo. Well, between Leo and Cancer, due to its retrogression. So Apollo's astrological number is 1862. But I made a video on YouTube already, so you might want to be checking that up or checking it out. But here I'm just going to give you a very short description. So in Leo, Apollo was about outward recognition and shining. And remember, Apollo is a kingly archetype. But now he's moving back into the sign of Cancer. So it's a little bit less important that how does the world look at me. It's more about, how do I lead my own life? How do I lead my family? What do I lead my country into? It's a little bit of an internal audit with retrograde as well. Apollo is the god of sun and music and truth, but he's also famous for predictions as well as healing too. So he is moving back into the sign of Cancer. He wants to reconnect with family members. He wants to heal the connection with those. But Apollo is like a flashlight. So that flashlight is going towards a dark basement right now. That's why we have to be re-examining, my role within an inner circle, my role in my country. This is telling us that we should be leading with heart rather than with ego. In the sign of Leo, we were leading with the ego, and in Cancer, we need to be leading with the heart. So, it is again somehow interestingly enough, Isis and Apollo moving on the same day into the sign of Cancer. So, surely this is about healing our reputation, healing our connections with others, healing our home environment. We might realize that I'm leading my family or household into something not so great. Or this is not about me being the boss of the household. This is about being the person who is going to be able to give them the flashlight moments, a certain type of clarity, the warmth, the love that they need, so that the love and peace can be restored somehow. I mean, Apollo is also about truth as well. So, this could talk to you about Apollo trying to reveal, the truth to you. But maybe you have been too busy looking at the bigger picture. Maybe you have been too busy of looking at the pride and the reputation and so forth in the sign of Leo. So this is somehow Apollo is telling you the truth so you can fix something before you go back into the sign of Leo where you can be public again. I mean, maybe this is also a realization of about your own childhood. Maybe you were expected to shine for others, but, at the expense of your emotional needs. So with Apollo and Isis both in Cancer, I think you can shine a light on these old patterns and then you can begin to reassemble a healthier version of your self-worth, of your heart center. Um, on the 19th, oh, sorry, we should go by day. On the 19th, Eros enters the sign of Cancer too. I mean, you can see that the Cancerian cusp is getting pretty active, right? But let's not forget one thing, that these are asteroids. So I don't want to say that asteroids are less important, you know, or they are less important than the planets, but they are a lot smaller objects as well. Now, Eros is astrological number is 433. And Eros spends approximately about 2.5 months in the same sign. Well, Eros goes approximately about 6 degrees each week. So it's about 2 months that it's going to spend. So it's going to be changing sign somewhere around 20th of April when it's going to move into the sign of Leo. Okay. So let's just look at what exactly happened. That's actually a exact 2 month period. I think, you know, Apollo is there to give you the truth. Eros is trying to give you that kind of soulful connection. Eros is about, it's not just about romance, but it's about what we are passionate about, what makes us feel alive. So in Cancer, the passion or what makes us feel alive is security, family, kind of like that inner sanctum, basically. So the asteroid of desire and attraction, it is it is giving us that pull towards the roots. For the last few weeks with Eros in Gemini, our desires could have been quite all over the place, basically. But now it becomes a little bit more specific. I'm craving for safety, for familiarity, something more personal. It's not about the surface level fun and chit chat anymore. I want to feel that soulful, soul level connection with the environment and the people in it. So it's not about going out to a loud party or a networking event. It's a bit more, staying in the bedroom, cooking a dinner, doing a family recipe like my mom used to, and sharing it with our loved ones. So we seem to be a little bit locked up in our home, basically. Of course, if you're in a relationship, this is not necessarily about what we are doing at the weekend. This is about how do we feel about our future, you know, or which film or movie shall we watch together on the couch? Eros in Cancer makes us quite vulnerable as well. But vulnerability can become attractive in the eyes of others. It's like me sharing a childhood memory with someone, and somehow that reignites a connection between two people. Cancer is fiercely protective. So you can be very protective towards your loved ones as well, with Eros being there. So imagine someone trying to criticize your inner circle. This Eros reacts with passion. It's not playing it cool type of stuff. It's gonna show where the loyalties lie, basically. So there's a lot happening in that sign of Cancer. Isis reassembles something. It says, let's fix something that is broken. Cancer is the sign of history, home, family. Apollo reveals the truth. And then Eros is just giving us that feeling that we need to have that safe environment. So let's move forward. Oh, of course, I came out of it, so no problem. We are going to animate again. So we are on the 21st of March when we have got Mars and Jupiter trine happening. Also quite a nice aspect actually. And again, Jupiter is super important. A lot of Piscean energy, and it's the exalted ruler of Cancer as well. We've got a lot of energy happening here too. So Mars is activating something here. This is Mars is giving us the energy that we might need to get things moving. This is, this Mars is very intuitive, so it's waiting for the perfect time to go towards the luck, to go towards the expansion and the growth. It's a water trine, so altogether it brings a lot of emotional intelligence into the picture as well. This is not a shouting combo. This is waiting for the right moment, and then do you get your way in somehow. This is very good to initiate, for example, making connections with someone or protecting your family or launching this creative project. This is giving you a lot of gut feeling. It can give you the feeling of impossible of losing somehow. This is a hunch here, a hunch that can pay off. Maybe you have been hesitant to make a move on a property or a family investment or a creative idea. And all of a sudden, we've got this feeling. We decide that we're going to pull that trigger. With Mars in Pisces, often the timing is impeccable. So this move isn't necessarily, again, based on spreadsheets. It's more based on instincts. And the instinct can lead to a major growth, a major expansion of some sort. I mean, there might have been tensions at home, let's say with your loved ones. And instead of just talking, which is Mercury, Mercury is still in trine to Jupiter of some sort. I'm going to do something about it. That's what Mars says. So I don't know, I'm going to show up with a meal. I'm going to help with the chore. I'm going to provide physical support. This is a small act of service. Pisces represents small act of services. And that gives that element of security to Jupiter. Maybe you have been working on a creative project, and maybe Mars is kind of like pushing you, let's finish it. It's trying to make you enthusiastic about it. This is about a door potentially opening to you. Do I have the bravery to walk through it? Am I overanalyzing the whys, or, am I overanalyzing the safety of moving through that door? Why? Because Mercury is stationary. And that Mercury right now is just has stopped to think about the future and the future implications of the future path with Mercury and North Node conjunction. But also we can use Mars and Jupiter all together to be kind, like a kind act, and that can bring you a certain type of a luck, actually. Mars is also often appears in in medical questions because it has got planetary joy in the sixth house. And but of course, Pisces is a health sign as well. So here, in that case, the body is telling you what to do. It's kind of like trying to make you feel lighter. It doesn't feel that heavy. So let's move on to 22nd of March. Sun is actually making conjunction to Neptune. So basically, the Sun moves into the sign of Aries on the 21st of March, which I'm going to make a separate video about. And then, of course, the Sun runs into Neptune the next day. So this is pretty much your equinox chart. But like I said, we're going to talk about that. And then the next day, 3 days after, the sun is going to run into Saturn as well. So I'm going to talk about that as well. That's going to be happening on the 24th or the 25th of March. But pretty much we've got the Aries point getting activated, which is the most potent degree in the chart. That's about new beginnings. So, basically, this is the astrological new year. And I would like to invite you to check out um, my flash sales because we are celebrating astrology. I decided to do a 2 day um, flash sales. So my readings are 30% discounted. Courses and webinars are also 30% discounted. So if you would like to grab a reading with me, then go on my website, AstroViktor.com, and check it out. But let's go back to that sun a little bit. I mean, Neptune and Saturn are a bit at odds. You know, um, Saturn Neptune is about dreaming it into reality. And because they are still making the conjunction, the sun is kind of like bringing these two planets now together. Imagine that the sun is somehow highlighting the odd feelings between Saturn and Neptune. Neptune is just imagining things, and Saturn says, no, we have to be disciplined about it. So the Sun is trying to make Saturn and Neptune to work together, to birth something completely new. So this is where the ideal kind of like meets the infrastructure, Saturn, Neptune. And the sun says, that's the path forward. This is how I want the two of you to work in the next 1 year. And I'm gonna give you, different plans during the year, but this is the blueprint. So that Neptune gives you the dream, let's say for a new business, and then let's say the sun says, let's sit down. Let's draw this actual blueprint, and that's Saturn. Um, and because it's really close to the world axis, it's going to be impacting the world significantly. But it says, Neptune, someday I'm going to do that. While the sun says, no, this is day one. Let's start right now. Let's have both the vision and the discipline to make something happen. Now, of course, it depends on the house position where it happens, but it can be, a habit or a lifestyle, but the sun is our purpose. We don't have to feel guilty. We have to feel inspired, right? So the sun Neptune can give us a lot of inspiration as well. Saturn does feel a little bit guilty about choosing the self rather than looking at other people's, needs and so on. Like I said, I'm going to be making a separate video about that. And 23rd, we've got Juno in Capricorn, trine Uranus in Taurus. We're gonna have to talk a little bit longer about this, actually. The reason why, because this is the 23rd, sorry about that here. Because Juno is already in shadow period as well. It's reached the shadow degrees. So let me start just talking about um, the shadow period first. The shadow period is basically when the planet is going to return to that particular degree. Um, after once it goes retrograde. So what's going to happen here is that Juno is in the sign of Capricorn and it's going to move into the sign of Aquarius, but then it's going to go retrograde and it's going to come back to um to Capricorn. So that is happening somewhere around 25 degree. Well, um Juno, to be precise, enters the shadow period on the 14th of March. So 25 degree right here. Okay, and then it moves forward. And then it's making that trine to Uranus. Okay, but that's all I wanted to quickly mention about the shadow period. But it means that Juno and Uranus will be meeting later on as well this year. Juno represents our commitments, our contracts, our long-term partnerships. So, of course, she's in Capricorn, so she's looking for some stability and status. And with Uranus, we are giving an upgrade. We are giving a modern upgrade, something that potentially provides even more security. So, Juno is very disciplined and very committed in the sign of Taurus. Like, it's committed to get married. And then Uranus does it with a bit of excitement, with a bit of twist. Or imagine that this is a contractual agreement. Juno in Capricorn can talk to us about a business contract. And then Uranus upgrades that. So why don't we put something extra in that contract? A little bit feels like it's a lot of logistics of loyalty as well. It really feels like that this week is about signing a contract, formalizing a certain type of a partnership, upgrading a long-term agreement, but using some new innovative terms. Maybe, we decide to restructure our agreement, and instead of something traditional, let's say we move to a new digital payment system, for example, in the business world. Or maybe it's about upgrading your relationship. Maybe we are ready to talk about the future. But instead of something boring, I want to come up with an unconventional type of upgrade to it, or an unconventional living arrangement, or a new ways of handling finances, for example. Or maybe this is about you receiving a job offer, a promotion, something that might involve technology or a risky type of industry as well. But Juno, of course, is still wanting to build that solid foundation. But this path is, maybe it feels like that this is going to feel secure. So that's the weekly energy pattern. We're gonna talk about Juno a lot more in the future because she's going to be quite busy coming up. So now let's break this down for all 12 signs. So see you in your personal sign, and you can listen to your sun, moon, and rising sign. Take care. Bye bye.